United States versus Vasquez Velasco. The issue brought before the court involves an appeal of a criminal conviction. The circumstances of these events occurred on January 30th, 1985. Vasquez Velasco, a member of a drug cartel in Guadalajara, killed one American citizen and one American legal resident on Mexican soil. Velasco was convicted by a U.S. jury of committing violent crimes and for being in violation of a U.S. Code 18, Section 1959, regarding violent crimes and aids of racketeering activity. Specifically, the indictment alleged that Velasco, as a member of the cartel, participated in the murders of Walker and Radelet for the purpose of maintaining and increasing his position in the drug trafficking activities of the cartel. Velasco appealed the conviction. The issue of this case and the involvement of international law have to do with the principle of extraterritoriality. The question is whether U.S. penal laws apply extraterritorially in this case, where a U.S. citizen was killed due to being mistakenly assumed a federal agent.
Velasco's appeal arises out of the second trial associated with the 1985 kidnapping and murders of Enrique Camarena, an American agent with the DEA, and Alfredo Zavala, a DEA informant in the case of United States versus Felix Gutierrez. In order to convict Velasco of this crime, the U.S. government was required to prove 1. That the Guadalajara narcotics cartel exists, 2. That the cartel is a racketeering enterprise engaged in drug smuggling, 3. That the Vasquez Velasco participated in the murders of Walker and Radelet, 4. That Vasquez Velasco acted for the purpose of promoting his position in the drug cartel. To determine whether a given statute should have extraterritorial application in a specific case, courts look to congressional intent. In general, international law recognizes several principles whereby the existence of extraterritorial jurisdiction may be appropriate. These principles include the objective territorial principle, under which jurisdiction is asserted over acts performed outside of the United States that produce detrimental effects within the United States, and the protective principle, under which jurisdiction is asserted over foreigners for an act committed outside the United States that may impinge on the territorial integrity, security, or political independence of the United States. Thus, Congress would have intended that Section 1959 be applied extraterritorially to cases involving the murder of DEA agents abroad. Additionally, the U.S. government argued that extraterritorial application of Section 1959 to violent crimes associated with drug trafficking is reasonable under international law principles. This is because drug smuggling is a serious and universally condemned offense. No conflict is likely to be created by extraterritorial regulation of drug traffickers. The murders of Walker and Radelet, like the murder of Agent Camarena in the U.S. versus Felix Gutierrez case, were performed to further the cartel's drug smuggling activities by intimidating the DEA from continuing its enforcement activities against the cartel's drug trafficking. Such actions could also intimidate local police and drug agencies, thereby inhibiting them from cooperating with the DEA. In this context, the murder of American citizens has an equally direct and adverse impact on United States security interests in combating the importation and trafficking of illegal narcotics.
The background to the U.S. government's theory at trial had to do with presenting the history of drugs in Mexico. Their case rested on the facts that the cartel began distributing large amounts of drugs into the U.S. in the early 1980s. According to the government, in 1984 and 1985, American DEA enforcement activities resulted in losses to the cartel totaling billions of dollars. As a result of these losses, the cartel engaged in a series of retaliatory actions against DEA agents in Mexico. The murders with which Vasquez Velasco and his co-defendants were charged involved the suspicions that they were part of these retaliatory activities. The main purpose of the case, though, rests on the ability of the U.S. to prove that the murders were committed against the DEA, because if this could not be proven, then extraterritorial jurisdiction would be difficult to apply. If the evidence at trial only suggested that 2 tourists were randomly murdered, extraterritorial application of Section 1959 would be inappropriate.
The defendant, Vasquez Velasco, appealed the United States conviction on multiple grounds. First, Velasco affirmed that the district court ruling erred on the grounds that Section 1959 does not apply extraterritorially, and therefore the United States had no jurisdiction over this matter. Secondly, Velasco contended that should Section 1959 hold extraterritorial application, This was insufficient evidence to couple the murder of 2 American tourists with the DEA's activities within Mexico. Velasco confirmed that no individual during trial testified that Walker and Radelet were murdered as a result of being mistaken for a DEA agent, and so the retaliation claim does not apply. Thirdly, Velasco maintained that the counts brought against him and his other 3 co-defendants from a prior case were improperly joined with the murders of Walker and Radelet.
Although Velasco participated in the murder of an American citizen and not the murder of a DEA agent, the court ruled that Section 1959 was still appropriate in this case and did in fact apply extraterritorially to reach the crimes committed by Velasco in Mexico. So, the implications of this ruling demonstrate that states can claim jurisdiction for acts that are committed outside of their borders, if the act committed threatens in any way the security or the safety of their own state, or furthermore diminishes their state internally. In this particular case, then, Velasco was punished for trying to deter or instill fear in U.S. federal agents to not undermine their success in Mexico, which was built on their handlings with narcotics. The crime, then, was directed against the U.S.